do it through the agent, but if he does,
better do it himself.
Better to do it yourself. Then it says, Aisha miskadeshes ba'u lishlucha. A woman can be betrothed through herself or through her agent. And then it says, Aish mekadeshes bito kishehi naira ba'u lishlucha. A man can betroth his daughter when she's a naira through himself or through his agent. Now, the Gemara then says like this, Hashta. Let's say what's happening here. The Gemara says, wait a second. Bishlucha mekadesh. If he could do it with his agent. Oh, mi boya? Is there any question that he could do it through himself? I mean, why do you need the Mishnah to tell you that? Amar Rav Yosef, the novelty of the Mishnah is to teach us mitzvah bo yoser mi bishlucho. It's a bigger mitzvah for him to do it through himself than through his agent. And Rav Yosef gives us an example. The Gemara gives an example. Ki hadar of safra, machrik resha of safra would singe the heads. Rava molach shibuta. Rava would salt the fish for Shabbos, which shows that when it comes to Shabbos preparations, which is a mitzvah, it's better to do it yourself than through your agent. Then the Gemara says there's another approach to this whole thing. Ikeda Amri, others say what the Mishnah is teaching you when it says Aish Mekadesh Vo Vishlucho, it's emphasizing you should do it through himself because Beha Isura Nami Isba. In this, there is indeed a prohibition, Kid Rav Yehuda Amarav, in keeping with the teaching of Rav Yehuda, who said it in the name of Rav. Anytime you see somebody in the name of somebody, it generally means he was a disciple of his. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav. Rav Yehuda is quoting his Rebbe, Rav. Amar Rav, it says sometimes, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That teaches that Rabbi Yochanan was a disciple of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So it will, or sometimes it could be that he just heard a quote in his name. Okay? Kid the Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, the Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Asr Ladam Shekadesh Isha. A man's forbidden to betroth a woman Ad Shirena until he sees her. Shema Yireba Dover Meguna, lest he sees something unsightly in her. V'tisgana olav, and she will be repulsive to it. Rachmana Amar, the Torah says, V'ahavda l'recha kamochi, you must love your fellow man as yourself. I just saw when Rav Ovadia Yosef Maran, when he met his wife the first time, so they went for a walk, and she was very vivacious, and she was talking, and at a certain point she said to him, so what do you think? She had mentioned what she thinks about it, what do you think? He said to her, oh, I'm sorry, I was actually thinking about something else. We had just learned the sugya today, sugya in the Gemera, and I just wasn't paying attention. So she got very upset, and she went home. She said she can't marry this guy. Then he came to the house, and he said to her, listen, I apologize, it won't happen, and I'll pay attention to you. Right, and then eventually they got married. So the what do you call it? Rav Chaim Kanievsky, they say, he married Rav Elyashiv's daughter. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, anyway, is not a big talker, and he was always learning. So when he met her the first time, and when he talked to a girl, he met her the first time, what are you supposed to say? So he sat down at the table, and apparently he said to her, so what Gemara is your father learning? So what do you call it? So the Torah says you have to meet her. Hey, all these arranged marriages, by the way, where they have arranged marriages, certainly by Hasidim, and certainly by, I don't know, the Persian community, and probably in the old days they certainly did that. Even in an arranged marriage, they still have a choice. You can't force people to marry each other. You can't force people. They have to have a choice. So what the assumption is that since anyway before marriage everything is different than after marriage, the two meet. They're compatible. You can chat for 15 minutes. You can chat for a lifetime. By the Hasidim, you sit, you talk to the girl 15 minutes, then the father comes in. No, let's do it. Yeah or no? Yeah, you're nished. Right? And that's it. She's not unattractive. You can tell she's not unattractive because you were able to look at her for 15 minutes. But the guy comes out and says, sorry, sorry, this ain't going to happen. Okay, finish. Bite, go to the next one. That's and they have beautiful marriages because like Mordechai mentioned, it has to do with your attitude going into the marriage, not the secular world, not the secular world opinions. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to know if it's pretty much what you do have to do is you have to have some sort of goal in life. So people always say, I'm looking for my other half. You have to find the first half before you find the second half. So sometimes you have to know what you're looking for, where you're headed, where you're going. Once you know where you're going, then you can find somebody. She's going the same place as you. Good, you guys, a nice girl. Marry her. Finish. Then go deal with her. Right. Either way. After secular statistics show that in the secular world, people who have lived together before marriage have a higher divorce rate than after marriage than people who have not? This is where with all the testing for compatibility and everything else, they have a higher divorce rate statistically. This is not a Torah statistic. This is a secular world statistic. Why that is, I'm not sure. I could guess, but at the end of the day, it has to do with your attitude, not your. And nowadays, we are not great. Our society is not great on commitment in general. We're not people who are great. You know, it used to be in the old days, you committed yourself to something and you did it. You just did it, whether it was your job, whether it was your marriage, whether it was whatever you did. You committed yourself. You did. You didn't like it. You did it anyway. In our society, there's an expression to blow it off. You know, I got a meeting with someone. I'm going to blow it off. You know, I have a Shabbos. I was invited somewhere for Shabbos. I'm going to blow it off. You know, that's the attitude. So within that attitude, that's what marriage is. You know, that's why the marriages look the way they do. So the Torah says over here that the primary consideration is V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. That is the first part of the Mishnah. Then the Gemara continues. Everybody see where that is. First word on line is kamocha. Second word on the line, V'chi itmar de Rav Yosef. According to this opinion, the statement of Rav Yosef, aseifa itmar. It's going on the end part of the Mishnah. The end part of the Mishnah says, Ha'isha miskadeshes ba'u v'shlucha. A woman is betrothed through herself or through her agent. Hashta. Now wait a second. Bishlucha mikadesha. She could be betrothed through her agent. Ba mi ba'ya. Is there any doubt that it worked through herself? Amar Rav Yosef. The Mishnah is teaching us in the second part. Mitzvah ba'yoser mi bishlucha. It's a mitzvah for her more than her shliach. And again, he cites the same example. Ki hadar of Safra machich reisha. Rav Safra would singe the heads. Rav malach shibuta. Aval beha isura lesba. There is no prohibition. Why? Kidder Reish Lakish. The Amar Reish Lakish says tav lemesav tandu mi lemesav armalu. Better to sit two together than to sit alone. Now, what's remarkable about this statement of Reish Lakish is a remarkable statement. I once noticed that there's no accident. I don't believe there's an accident. Reish Lakish said this. You know why? Reish Lakish, the Gemara says, was a bandit. He was the head of the outlaws. And he once jumped into the river to assault Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was bathing in the Jordan River. And Reish Lakish jumped into the water to assault Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan saw, apparently Reish Lakish he was the head of this gang of outlaws. There's one opinion that he had never been religious. There's another opinion that he was actually an off-the-derech kid. And Toso says that he had learned and he left it. And so there are two opinions. So Reish Lakish jumped into the water to attack Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan said to him the famous words, Chelech le'oraisa. You ought to use your strength for Torah. That physical strength that you have, you can make such a jump, you ought to put that strength into Torah. So Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara says, was a very beautiful man. He had a certain glow, certain beauty to him. And Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Shufrech l'nashi. Your beauty is best by women. Yeah, what does a man need beauty for? You know, your beauty is lost on you. Women are concerned with beauty. It's a shame that your beauty doesn't exist by women. So Rabbi Yochanan thought to himself, that's what he's interested in? He said, I have a sister who's more beautiful than I am. If you devote your life to Torah, I'll let you marry my sister. And he did. Reish Lakish married Rabbi Yochanan's sister, and he became the great Reish Lakish, who became a colleague of Rabbi Yochanan's. So, you stop and think about it. I said, how did that information, when Rabbi Yochanan proposed the shidduch to his sister, how did that work? All right. Oh, by the way, I got a great match for you. Really? Yeah. Is he a top guy? Top guy. Top of the FBI's 10 most wanted list. But he's a top guy. Top is top. Best guy in Lakewood. Top guy. And she married Reish Lakish. So apparently Reish Lakish knew from personal experience. I'm sure that his sister relied on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan's sister relied on the great Rabbi Yochanan. If he said it's a good shidduch, it's a good shidduch. But it's just interesting that it was Reish Lakish himself who said, a woman will marry anyone rather than sit by herself. And therefore, it's very ironic that statement came from Reish Lakish. Okay. Now that's what we did. That's what we did yesterday. Now let's go on to the next piece of Gemara, because now we're going to see a Tosos today. We're going to go for a little bit of a ride. Let me just get the names again. Again, your name is Yitzchak. Benny. Baruch. Baruch. Okay, we got two Baruchs. Yishai, who's behind you?
Johnny.
What's the Hebrew name?
Eliezer Chai.
Johnny. and Mordechai. Okay,
Really
we're on a roll.
Rabbi, but you just said something. I just think it's a super confidence builder for guys dating. That like a woman rather be married than be alone. That's like should be the ultimate confidence.
The ultimate confidence builder. That means even a guy like me can get married.
Exactly.
There's hope for everybody.
Exactly.
The Gemara says that again it has to do with a woman's nature. A woman is what we spoke about yesterday, which is none of this is a joke. Even if I joke about it, none of it's a joke because we've been so distorted and just bent out of shape by contemporary society. Even the biggest feminist in the world, at the end of the day, the biggest feminist in the world wants a husband who's going to cherish her. She's only a feminist because she's been pushed by the society to be a feminist. And she doesn't know that. I once read from Time Magazine. Time Magazine once had a report on the women, the original feminists from the feminist movement. So the original women, of course, were Jewish. And it was a report on these women. They're in their early 40s. And the women are now lamenting the fact that they have very little chance of getting married, almost no chance of having children. They're saying we were duped by our society. Our society brainwashed us. They told us that this is the ideal of life. Where's the family? Where are the kids? Where's the husband? Where's everything? I just saw a lady yesterday walking the dog on the street. I didn't say anything obviously because I'm a gentleman, but I was thinking to myself, you should have a lot of nachas from your dog. If you raise a dog, then you're gonna have dog nachas. You raise children, you have children nachas. That's what the society's indoctrinated us with. So sein mit Glück. You have a lot of nachas from your dog. So he's right. A woman who meets you, you're not everything she wants, but the women are looking at your potential. You have the potential. She'll develop you. She'll develop the potential of a husband. You are her project. She is the azer. She is the assistant. The boss doesn't develop the assistant. The assistant helps the boss. That's the way it works. Therefore, they're desperate. They want to get married. I think Hillary Clinton once said she made a comment. She said, "I'm not one of those stand by your man and bake cookies type of women." So my wife heard this side. My wife, I think, was in a magazine or something. My wife said, "Yeah, well, maybe if she would have been, her husband wouldn't be running around on her." So it's like at the end of the day, you can be the Secretary of State. You can do whatever you want. But what would she really prefer is a husband who's faithful to her and cherishes her. You could be the most famous woman in the world. And at the end of the day, what she'd really rather have is a husband who comes home and she makes him a dinner and he cherishes her and she knows where he is at all hours of the day. Ha'ish mekadesh es bito. Good, I got to my chest. Ha'ish mekadesh es bito kishinara. Man betrothed his daughter when she is a nara. So yesterday we said, remember what a nara is. A nara is that intermediate state between being a katana and a gedola. She's 12 years old and she has the onset of physical maturity. She is a nara. So the Mishnah says a man could betroth his daughter when she is a nara through himself and through his agent. Okay, now, says the Gemara, Kishehi nara in this context means yes. Sometimes the word in Gemara you'll see Aleph Yud Nun. Aleph Yud Nun sometimes means ein, which means it is not, the negative, and sometimes which is a Hebrew word, and sometimes it's the Aramaic word in, which means, yes. And it usually comes at the end of a sentence. So the only way to figure it out in a Gemara is by jiggling it around in context.
I thought you were going to say art scroll.
Yeah, I say other than an art scroll, the only way to know if you're looking at a raw Gemara is by checking it in context. Which way makes more sense in context? What did you mean in context? So the Gemara says, "Aish mekadesh es bito kishehi nara." A man betroths his daughter when she is a nara. Says the Gemara, "Kishehi nara in." When she is a nara, yes. Kishehi ketana, lo. He cannot betroth her when she is a ketana. Now, we know that the halacha is, what if the father does accept betrothal for his daughter? It works. A father who betroths his daughter, even when she's a ketana, he accepts Kidushin money, he accepts a ring for the daughter's betrothed. According to halacha, he could do it. But the Gemara is saying that when the Mishnah says a man can do it, again, we're talking about what? A man betroths his daughter when she's nara. What does that mean? He betroths her lichatchila. B'di'evet, it works even if she's a ketana. B'di'evet, it works even after the fact. But the preferred course is you shouldn't do it. Okay? Why? Misayele lirav. This supports. Misayele means it's a support for a statement that was made by Rav, which again is going to be quoted by his disciple Rav Yehuda. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, V'itema, and some say Rabbi Elazar, some say that the statement is credited to Rabbi Elazar. The following statement: Asur le'adam she'yekaresh es vito shehi ketana. A man is not allowed to betroth his daughter when she is a minor. Ad shetigdal, until she gets older. Vitomar, and she should say Biploni ani rotza. I want so and so. That means like this: a father betroths his daughter who is a nara. That's with her consent. Father cannot betroth his daughter who is a nara without her consent. A ketana has no say in the matter. The nara has to give her consent. If the nara gives her consent, then the father could accept Kidushin. He could accept the betrothal for her. Okay. What about the ketana? What about the ketana? The ketana, you shouldn't betroth her, because when a ketana with you, one second. What I said is not accurate. Just 1 second. One second. One second. I'm not sure what I said was accurate. Just 1 second. Okay. So the father betroths the daughter when she's the father betroths the daughter when she is a nara, and I think, I'm not positive, I think that requires the nara's consent, if I'm not mistaken. A ketana, you don't need her consent. Yet the Gemara says, don't do it until she gets older and she says, I want ploni. Why not? What are we worried about? If she'll end up married to the guy, then what will happen? She won't like him. You should have a problem. You should ask a kasha. You should ask a kasha.
So why for the Nara you could say yes?
So the Nara, again, I think it needs the Nara's consent. There are two approaches here. Either it needs the Nara's consent, or the Nara, the Nara gives her consent, I think it requires her consent. That's what I'm not positive about. By the Nara, I think it requires her consent. A ketana whose consent you don't require, you still have complete legal jurisdiction over her. Look, according to the halacha in the Torah, a father could sell his daughter. The Torah talks about a situation where a father is so destitutely poor, he could sell his daughter, who is a minor, to somebody else. Ideally, the new owner should marry her, but he's allowed to sell her because he's poor, and it's the lesser of two evils. He can't feed his daughter. So the best thing he can do is sell her to somebody else as a maidservant. At least she'll have 3 meals a day. In the best scenario, the new owner, or his son will marry her. So again, no father wants to sell his daughter. No father wants to sell his daughter. But if you're in a situation where the daughter's starving, so the lesser of two evils, parents didn't want to put their kids on trains during the Holocaust either and send them off. There were parents who did that because they knew if they keep the daughters with them, they're going to die. And the parents had no way of escaping. They'd take a 5-year-old daughter and put her on a train and just go. Maybe there's some hope for her, right? So it's certainly not the preferred course. So here the Torah is saying a father can sell his daughter if he wants to. If he has to, he could sell his daughter if he's desperate. So he can certainly accept Kidushin for her. Comes along the court and says, don't. Why? Because maybe she'll get older. She wait till she's older and she says, I want to marry this guy. What's the obvious question?
You have a famous case like that with a celebrity Madonna. I think parents in Africa, they sell give away the daughters.
Right. So what's the obvious question here? What's the obvious question? What's the obvious question? Maybe it's not so obvious. What's the question here? You have a question. Something should be bothering you about this. Think about this for a second.
What happens to the Kidushin?
The Kidushin is valid. B'di'evad, the Kidushin is valid.
No, meaning if she says no.
She says no, too bad. She'll have to get a get.
She'll have to get a get?
Yeah, it's a valid Kidushin, 100% valid Kidushin. If the father betrothed her, a valid Kidushin. You shouldn't be bothered by something else.
How could you consent to marry her when she's just a katana, when she's a little child? How could you?
You can marry her often. So you wait until she's at an age where she could physically get married. But the Kidushin is binding. The Kidushin is binding. In other words, she's married, whether or not they consummate the marriage or live together. So then you wait until she's of age. You know, a girl even by the time she's 9 years old, 10 years old, it's possible. But at the end of the day, the Gemara says, why don't you do it? Even though it works, why shouldn't you do it? Because you may say, listen, I don't like this guy.
Yeah.
You should be bothered by something.
And you said for the Nara, it needs consent to be.
I'm not positive. I think so. I think the Naira, the father, could accept the Kidushin if she consents to it. If I'm not mistaken, that I got to double check on. What's that?
Oh,
Armalo.
What's Armalo?
The Reish Lakish statement.
Very good. Very good. Very good. In others, we just said that a woman would rather marry anybody than be single. So why all of a sudden are you concerned? Why all of a sudden are you concerned that she's going to get older and she's going to reject the guy? A woman would rather be married to anybody than what? The Gemara just said. Why does a woman not have to see the man? Because we're not concerned a woman is going to, because a woman wants to get married under any circumstances.
She's older, though.
So
she's young right now. She has time. I mean, like, what's the rush?
okay, you're getting close. You're on the right track. In other words, obviously there's a reason why that principle doesn't apply here. Let's start the thinking process. We said that a woman would rather marry anybody than nobody. Here the Gemara says, don't marry off your daughter when she's a katana because there's a concern. So how do you reconcile the two? So obviously, let's start the thought process. Obviously, that principle which Reish Lakish said, for some reason, doesn't apply in this case. So now we have to find out what reason doesn't it apply. Obviously, it doesn't apply in this case. Otherwise the Gemara would say marry off your daughter at any age. So if the principle doesn't apply, we have to, let me just blow this out. I'll be right back. Think about that. Why doesn't the principle apply?
It applies to the older one because if she gets a little older, people are gonna be like, "Why isn't she married yet?"
Yeah,
But not to the younger.
desperate.
So
Yeah.
so we're saying that this woman hasn't been married this whole time?
No, this is for a younger girl.
Like an 8-year-old girl.
Like
Okay,
yeah,
so
before
we
the
get
age
that.
of 12.
She gets
Yeah,
married off.
The father betrothed her to a man.
Yeah, exactly.
We were saying like why is it like okay to not put that Reish Lakish statement on the girl that's younger than 12 years old? The Reish Lakish statement that said that a woman rather be married to a man than be alone.
So we're saying why are we applying it to someone under 12?
Yeah, why can't we apply it to the?
Why doesn't the Gemara?
I mean,
apply that?
maybe she's not a woman yet.
She's not concerned with marriage. She's so
I'm saying, but she's not a woman yet, right?
No, it's different. I guess that those times is different.
But I'm saying she's not. Does she have a menstrual?
Anybody got an idea? Why doesn't the principle apply?
Maybe she's
not
not
a
a woman
Gedola.
yet.
Say what?
She's not a woman yet.
Not a good.
She is, because halachically the father could betroth her. Father could betroth her. What do you say, Yitzhak?
I'm saying it applies to Gedola, I think, because she's more, not desperate, but she's more like, you know.
So that's what Benny wanted to say.
Yeah.
Gotta narrow it down a little bit into exactly what the point is. What is the point?
Because when they're older, then people are gonna be like, "There's something wrong with her." That's why she hasn't been.
No, you're getting too emotional. Nail it down to a logical reason. Okay, let's take a look at Tosos.
Maybe.
Let's take a look at Tosos. You see the Tosos is on the left column. Tosos is on the left column, and it says Osir le'odom. You see where it says Osir, the big black word Osir. Okay, this is the Tosos.
There's two us problem.
The second one, like towards the middle, more towards the middle of the page. Now, the first thing is Tosos and Rashi are written in a certain type of script, what they call Rashi script. Rashi did not innovate this script. People think Rashi wrote, and when they say Rashi script, Rashi must have invented a new script. The script has been around since long before Rashi. The reason it's called Rashi script is when the printers printed the Gemara, they wanted to make a distinction between what's the text of the Gemara and what's the text of Rashi. So they printed it in a different type of print, which has come to be known as Rashi script. In Rashi script, there are only really 4 letters which are significantly different than regular Hebrew writing. So don't be frightened by the style. So Rashi and Tosfos, in order to distinguish between the text of the Gemara, which is in the middle between the sidelines, Rashi and Tosfos are written in a different script. So let's see what that Tosfos says. Asr la'adam she'yekadesh es bito kishehi ketana. Says Tosfos, ve'af al gav. Af al gav means even though. De amar le'el. Even though we said earlier, de isura leka, that there is no prohibition. Mishu de tav lemesav tandu. Even though we said earlier there's no prohibition, as Baruch mentioned, because of the principle that a woman wants to be together with somebody. Says Tosfos, hani mili bigedola. That only applies to an adult girl, which Yitzhak and Benny said. But why? Why? Not because people think there's something wrong with her. Why? Shehi miskadeshes al yedei atzma. A girl who is older is betrothed on her own. When she's an adult, her father does not accept the betrothal. She is the one, under the chuppah, she has to accept the ring, not her father. Once she's over past the Nara stage, then it's a legal deal between you and her, not you and her father. Your father maybe get permission to get some money out of the guy, but it has nothing to do with the marriage. The marriage is between you and her once she is an adult. The Kevon shenisratses, since she agreed to it on her own volition, Leika lemechash, we don't have to be concerned, Shema tachazor, that she's going to change her mind. It could be she'll change her mind, but we don't have to think about it as a likelihood that she's going to change her mind. She agreed to marry the guy. The guy's a nice varf, the guy's a no good, the guy's this, the guy's a whatever. I don't care. I just want to get married. I'll marry anybody. So she'll marry anybody. Well, maybe she'll change her mind. Yeah, it could be, but we don't have to worry about it. Once she committed, because she made the choice on her own, which, by the way, gentlemen, this is also very interesting insight into a woman's nature. I'll explain to you in a second. Aval Ktana, a minor, Shemis Kadeshes Ayedei Avia, who is betrothed through her father, Ika Lemechash, there is room to be concerned, Shema, that perhaps Im Haisa Gedola, had she been an adult, Lo Haisa Misratzes, she wouldn't have been agreeable to this marriage. In other words, father says, okay, I got news for you. Remember in Fiddler on the Roof, where the shotgun wants to marry off the beautiful young girl to the blind old man. Right? So if the girl is a Gedola and she decides, I want to marry a blind old man, well, listen, that was your choice. But to go and say to your daughter, Mazel Tov, you're engaged. Really? Yeah. Is he a nice guy? Very nice. Is, can you tell me something about him? Well, he has a little trouble seeing. Really? Yeah, well, he's blind as a bat. Uh-huh. Oh, all right, but how old is he? He's 66. Yeah, but I'm only 14. I'm only 9. There's a little bit of a difference there, right? So we have to be concerned that if she was a Gedolah, she wouldn't have gone for this. Now, and therefore we're telling you, when that rule applies. In other words, what we're doing is we're putting a limitation on that rule of tablamet of tandu. Mordechai is the bad news. You said, well, this is great. This should give you all a lot of hope, right? Gives you all a lot of hope, but just remember, that's only if the girl chooses on her own, right? But if the girl's a ketana and the father marries her off, she says, hey, I never wanted this guy. I never wanted this guy. Now, there's a very interesting insight into human nature, into woman nature, not human, woman. There's very interesting insight into a woman's nature. A woman is. You ever hear the expression women are stubborn? You ever hear women are stubborn? Women are stubborn. The same idea. If she feels you're forcing her to do something, it could be the best idea in the world. She won't go for it. If she makes the choice on her own, she would. It could be the very same guy. Had she chosen the guy she married, but you're telling me to marry him? No, I'm not going to do that. There's a certain line of, okay, men are like that too. None of us like to be told what to do. But we are a little more pragmatic. In other words, you tell me that I should invest in a certain stock. I don't want to invest in that stock. You say, you really ought to do it because you can make a boodle. Well, it wasn't my idea, and I don't like being forced, but if I can make a boodle, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm pragmatic about it. A woman said, you ought to invest in that stock. No, I don't want to. You can make a boodle. I don't want to. Right? And that's it. The game's over. The game's over. Had she thought of it on her own, she probably would have done it. I don't like being told what to do. I imagine it's a defense mechanism among women because women always sense that men are trying to manipulate them. So I imagine it's a built-in defense mechanism. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. All I know is the Gemara is telling you over here that the difference is you're telling her to do it. Yeah, you're telling her to do it. That doesn't work.
So chivalry, that's why chivalry is important.
Chivalry is very important. Chivalry is very important.
Because you're convincing.
You're convincing her. That's right. You're convincing her. But even then, you're convincing her. I've seen. I'm married over 30 years. It's a great idea until my wife thinks of it on her own. And my wife is not a difficult person. My wife is a very easygoing person. But there's a certain line where when she's ready for it, then she'll do it. Not when I tell her she's ready for it. Not when I tell her it's a good idea. I ought to buy. Here right now we have to buy a new couch. We got rid of our old couch. I mean, I'm putting myself on the altar over here. I'm spending money on this, I'm saying to her, you ought to buy a new couch. Yeah, I will. I'm going to get the new couch. When I tell her, no, yeah, why don't you go tomorrow? You have a day off. Nah, not ready. This, that, and that. Can I not say you think she probably would have gone tomorrow?
Wow.
That's the way it works. It's not even unconscious. I don't even think it's conscious. It's conscious. But that's it. So the Gemara is telling you, sorry, it doesn't work over here. Sorry, it doesn't work over here. You can't be able to cut. Okay, now let's go on, because now he's going to give us this is just a fascinating piece of historical perspective. I said to my daughter once, my daughter was 7 years old, and she got a mouth on her. What she was, now she's 19. She still got a mouth on her, but she was 7 years old. She'd give me a hard time about something. I don't remember what it was. So at a certain point, I just looked at her, I said, according to halacha, I could sell you. So she looked at me, she goes, yeah, but you won't. And that was it. I lost the argument with the 7-year-old girl. So so the Gemara now says like this. Very interesting historical perspective here. Take a look at Tosfos. The Achshav, says Tosfos, nowadays, you see where that is, Achshav? Nowadays, she'anu nohagim lekadesh benoseinu, we are accustomed to betroth our daughters, afilu ketanos, even when they're minors. Nowadays, we betroth our daughters even when they're minors. Why is that? If the Gemara says it shouldn't, so why nowadays are we doing it? Hainu. Now let me ask you a question. When is nowadays written by Tosfos?
2,000 years ago?
No. Tosfos was 2,000. Gemara is 2,000 years ago. The base of Kidushin is 2,000 years ago. Tosfos spans the era from about the 1100s to the early 1400s. What was going on during that point? Where were the Tosafists? Tosafists are a school. France, Germany, Europe, right? So what was going on in the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries? Crusades. Isn't that interesting? Tosa says, nowadays, that we do betroth our daughters when they're minors. Hainu, the reason is, mishum shebechol yom v'yom, every day, hagolus misgaber aleinu, the exile is overwhelming us. Every day it gets worse. The im yesh sof sipek biad adam, if a person has the provisions, achshav, now loses labito nedunya, to give his daughter a dowry, shema la'achar zman lo yesipek biad, it could be next day, and after some time elapses, he won't have. The teshev bito aguna lonam, his daughter will be an old maiden. She'll be an aguna. She will never get married. All right. Now this brings us to an interesting subject. It brings, in other words, Tosfos is telling you, look, the Gemara says don't do it. But the Gemara is talking about a normal situation where things are calm, things are moving along the way they should. Then you got a choice. Don't marry off your daughter now. Wait till she can make her choice. So why nowadays do we marry off our daughters? We accept Kidushin even when they're ketanas. It doesn't say they finish the marriage at that point, but we accept the Kidushin, we make the commitment. Because if you've got a dowry to provide her with the dowry when you can. You don't have, because you don't know what's tomorrow. Remember in the Crusades they were coming around taking property, they were confiscating property. So the nature of a dowry is as follows, because this is also something that has to be understood. This is not limited only to Torah society. Dowry is something that has existed across the world all the time, forever. Dowry has always existed. And what the idea of a dowry is like this. A young couple gets married. Okay, now what's happened is, up until this point, the father has had total financial support for the daughter. Now, another man is taking on financial support for her. But as a younger person, you're usually less established, less financially stable than an older person. So in order to give the couple a head start, in order to give the husband a head start on being able to support a daughter, it was understood. And as I say, it's not limited to Judaism. This was the nature of the world always, that the husband received a dowry when he got married because he's going to need to support her. So the father has to come up with a certain amount of money in order to provide the couple with some means to live. And nowadays, imagine a guy gets married, he's just out of school, he's starting his first job, his father-in-law is much more established. So what's he supposed to do? And now he's got another mouth to support, and the father doesn't. Father's saving money. So it was accepted in society, a girl goes along with the dowry. Again, we're talking about societies where the women didn't work and the women weren't providing a second salary, because women in the old days you didn't just go and put bread up in a bread machine and have breakfast. The women started from scratch by grinding wheat and making bread every day and washing the clothing and doing everything in the house. It was a full-time job. There was no such thing as a woman working because she had to be in the house. Otherwise, nobody ate, nobody bathed, and nobody did anything else. You had to schlep water from the well, and so on and so forth. So the nature of society is that you have to provide a girl with a dowry. In today's society, a dowry in many communities is a place to live. In Israel, in the religious community in Israel, if a girl wants to get married, the father has to provide basically the cover the expenses of a flat where the couple is going to live. So it's not something you accept. Tosos is saying, why nowadays in the Middle Ages, why nowadays is it that a person, a person has to provide his daughter marries a daughter with a katana? Because otherwise you may not marry her off, because the Crusades were coming around confiscating property. Yeah, do go ahead.
My parents have told me that they used to do this in Iran too, like a few generations back, not that long ago. Because Muslims would come to the door and be like, we want to take your daughter. So they would marry them off from they're 13 or 14 to be like, oh, she's already married.
That was also one of the things that happened is they married them off young because just to get her married. There were situations through Jewish history. They would marry them off just for the sake of getting them married. Because once she's married, she has somebody to protect her, somebody to watch over her. Here, Tosos isn't talking about taking the daughter. He's talking about taking the property. Because remember, in the Crusades especially, Jews were often moneylenders. Jews were often moneylenders because that was the only job they were allowed to do. They weren't allowed any other job. The people owed them money, and eventually there was a pogrom. They burned down the city, burned the records. So Tosa says the practical consideration over here, as a practical consideration, marry her off even when she's young. When you've got the money, pay it because of extenuating circumstances. That's what Tosa is saying. Okay, now we're going to go on to the next piece of Gemara. I just want to start it today. We'll lay down the groundwork for tomorrow. The groundwork for this next piece of Gemara actually comes from a pasuk in the Torah, in the book of Devarim in chapter 24. And this is a very interesting concept. So let's first deal with the concept. The Torah says that here. Says the Torah like this. There are 3 psukim here. The Torah says when a man takes a woman, ki yikachi shisha, man takes a woman, they live together, and she does not find favor in her eyes because he found something inappropriate in her behavior, the kosav lo sefer krisus, he should write her a document of severing, which is what we call nowadays a get. V'nosan biyoda, he should put it in her hand. The shilcha mi beso, and he sends her from his house. Okay, now that's going to be the key word that we're going to dwell on tomorrow, is the word vishilcha. He writes her a document and sends her from his house. That's the get. Okay. Then the Torah says the yatsa mi beso, she goes out of his house. The holcha vaysa lishacher, and then she can marry somebody else. So the man sends her off. She marries a second husband. If the second husband just does not like her, he writes her a get, and he sends her off. And then the Torah says her first husband, who had sent her off, cannot take her again as a wife.
Ever?
Ever. Now, that being the case, I want to tell you a remarkable halacha, and you'll tell me the logic.
Which parsha was that?
That's Parsha Kiseitze, okay, in the book of Devarim. So I'll tell you an interesting halacha, and then you'll tell me what's going on, what the logic is. Torah says, Reuven is married to Leah. He divorces Leah. She marries Shimon. Shimon divorces Leah. She can't go back to Reuven. Okay? What would happen if Reuven divorced Leah, and then Leah simply lived with Shimon and had an illicit relationship with Shimon? You know, they were living together and then they broke up. Then she is allowed to go back and remarry her husband Reuven. If she gets a proper divorce from Shimon, she cannot go back and remarry her husband Reuven. If she married Shimon and then got divorced, or even if Shimon died, either way. But if she never married Shimon, they're just living together, they're sinning, and then she goes back, he dies or they get divorced, or then she just leaves him. Then she could go back and remarry Reuven. Why? What's the logic to that? You hear what's going on here? Exactly counterintuitive, right? Isn't that counterintuitive? When you have thought, well, once she sins, she's off limits to her husband. She legitimately gets married. She got divorced, so you go back to her first husband. Why?
What I think, or are you asking for?
I'm asking for what you think logically, if you've come to a logical conclusion, not a guess.
Yeah, I'm wondering if. Oh, does somebody else want to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if by divorcing and then remarrying someone, you're saying that person is totally separate now, like the one from before. And if you marry the new one and divorce him, they're going to think, well, maybe you were really still with the other one, and then you want to go back.
Interesting idea. It's an interesting idea.
It would look like you're leaving the second husband to be with the
but
first
if you have,
husband.
the bottom line is, if you have it's an interesting idea. Interesting idea. But then by that reasoning, then if she just lives with the second guy, she should also be off limits to the first guy. And there's something else behind this in the Torah.
Is it like a takana, or is this like a...
No, it's halacha. It's a pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk in the Torah.
Maybe so that... I don't know, I just remember hearing something like it was done like to prevent, like, you know, people getting married and divorced and married and divorced.
Why?
So, like, it would be promote promiscuity.
And if here's a woman who's already promiscuous, she's going and living with another guy.
That's a b'diavad.
What do you mean a b'diavad?
She sinned, but it wasn't like we would be making it l'chachila.
Okay, very good. You're certainly on the right track. In other words, the Torah. Yeah, go ahead, Mordechai.
I was going to say, I would say the difference is, you know, the marriage, you're entering into an agreement, a contract. And if, you know, you enter a new agreement, a new contract, it probably is a true severing.
So that's what David was saying, something along those lines. So the idea here is, and there is some merit to what you're saying. The idea here is like this: we're concerned for something called wife swapping, which is what Baruch was saying.
Commits to the second one, she could do it.
In other words, when you legitimize something, so then ironically that sometimes leads to worse situations when it's not legitimate. In other words, how many frum women are going to get divorced and then go sinning? That's not something we have to be concerned about. It could happen. It's not likely. The Torah says don't commit bestiality, right? Okay, it's not likely bestiality is going to happen. Okay, it could happen because the Torah says it could happen. The Torah says don't. That means it could. But it's not likely to happen.
We don't
right?
live on farms.
However, however, when a woman goes and a woman gets a legitimate get, she marries somebody else, gets a legitimate get from him. Everything's kosher. Everything's kosher. So now you'll go back to her friend. So two men may make an agreement. Hey, I got an idea. You know, why don't you divorce your wife for a couple of weeks? I'll divorce my wife for a couple of weeks, and we'll remarry them. Then we'll go back afterwards. So then you get into what's called wife swapping. Whereas the other way, we don't have to be concerned. If Reuben divorces Leah, Leah's not going to go start messing around. As a frum woman, most women aren't. We have to be concerned. So if one woman did, she could go back to her husband. It's not going to turn into a societal norm. Whereas if a woman is divorced and she's legitimately divorced, and everything is kosher, the whole thing is tried.
Oh.
Therefore, the Torah says, as a precaution to prevent this concept of wife swapping, That's what the Sefer HaChinuch says. Therefore, the Torah says she's not allowed to go back to her original husband, even if she has a legitimate get and legitimate divorce from the second husband.
This
Now,
is from the Torah?
It's a
Or
Torah
is
law.
that a takana?
it's a Torah law. I just read you. The Torah says openly she can't go back to the first husband. It's a pasuk in the Torah.
So there's a good reason you're saying that.
And
this
the
could happen.
reason is offered by the Sefer HaChinuch, but there's obviously, the Torah says that there's got to be a reason for it. And the reason is that the Torah is saying, take the precaution because of wife's wife. But that's it's a straight out statement from the Torah. Now, the reason I even bring this up, I mean, we're talking about Kidushin. So why did I bring this up? Because the word Vishilcha appears. The word Vishilcha, and he shall send her out of her house. That word is going to be the central word on what we learn tomorrow. Because based on that word, we're going to derive a halacha in the Gemera, and we're going to derive a comparison between get and Kidushin based on the word Vishilcha. So that we'll see tomorrow in this session. Okay? At 11:30 we start. 11:35 we'll start the Haggadah.
How about a question?
Yes.
Can a male Na'ar, like a younger guy,